warm welcome, everyone, to today's Sime podcast. It's the 1st of December 2022, and we're in the second day of Sime, the inspirational conference about all things digital, about building bridges, taking place at Epicenter in Stockholm. And my name is Sjöblad. I'm your host today. I am the Chief Disruption Officer here at Epicenter Stockholm, trying to understand what's going on in the world, understanding disruption, and helping our friends and members here to navigate technological transformation. With me today, I have a fascinating guest that we're very happy to have on board. So a warm welcome to you, James. How are you today?
I'm great. Happy you pronounce my name perfectly, and that doesn't always happen.
You are too polite. James, tell us a few things about yourself. On your business card, it says NATO. But would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, hopefully a bit more than NATO. So I'm a Canadian, NATO basically my whole career. And I came from the Defense Department. I was a journalist for a little while. And then I've had a number of jobs at NATO. I was a speechwriter for the Secretary General. Then I was the spokesman of NATO. Then I spent 10 years doing political affairs, which is more traditional diplomacy. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved over to innovation, which is absolutely why I'm here today.
Indeed. I think you're in the right place, and we're very happy to have you, because innovation is really what we're all about and what we enjoy talking about. But do you mind, can we double click a little bit on innovation here? What does innovation mean for you? What's the context of innovation?
I guess my views personally aren't relevant, but NATO's approach to it, I think, is, again, why I'm here, probably what you're interested in. So
Yes.
NATO has always been interested in innovation, because you can imagine that when it comes to security, when it comes to armed forces, I think for many years, and that's actually part of why I'm reaching out now, for many years, for decades, the military was driving innovation. Silicon Valley came from the military.
DARPA. We have a lot of cases. Right?
Absolutely. The internet is a creation of the military. I think something like 10 of the 12 technologies that run everybody's mobile phone, everybody looks at Steve Jobs and says, oh, what a genius. But actually, he pulled together, in an elegant way, technologies that had been driven by the military. But that's changing. 20 years ago, 80% of innovation was coming from the government. Well, people say it's inversed, 20% government, 80% private sector. So
Can I interrupt? Why is that so, you think, James?
I think one of the reasons is money. There's just a lot more money in private sector investment. But I think another part of the problem, and this is also how NATO's looking at this, is we in government are slow. We're slow when it comes to contracting. We're slow when it comes to acquisition. And as a result, especially as innovation cycles go much more quickly, we're just getting left behind. So it's really important that we do that. And I think there's another reason, something else we need to break down, and that is increasingly, until very recently, a lot of companies didn't want to work with security. A little bit nervous about what was going to happen with their technology.
Yeah, will they take our IP, etc.?
Well, will they take our IP, or how are they going to use it? You know, if you're going to give us some AI code, what's it going to be used for? And we can come back to that and the principles of responsible use for this technology.
Indeed.
So I think these are all the reasons, or probably the majority of the reasons, why innovation has moved away from governments and more towards private sector.
I think you're spot on. And can I just rhyme in with that experience? Yes, what we have seen here at Epicenter, of course, throughout, we've done a lot of innovation programs with large corporates. And one of the first insights, the reason why many of them come to us, is that we're smart. We've been building this thing for 100 years in our company, whatever it is cars or some kind of equipment. But they have come to the realization that even though we have all these smart people in our building, we do not have all the answers, right? So we simply have to look outside. We need to connect with innovators, with the startups, with the scale-ups systematically, which is, for me, also the phase change. It's not just about, of course, they've always had academic researchers and innovation projects, but it's about having systematic structured programs, about connecting with innovation communities, picking up ideas, evaluating them in a sort of according to a strategic model. And of course, as you also mentioned at the end, the pace of innovation, right? So we may have a great project over here, but we simply need to diversify, because we don't know where things are going to stand in 2 years' time.
Absolutely. And coming to what I've been doing and what I've been helping to do with my colleagues, because it's certainly not just me, is what we're trying to do is break through all of that. We're trying to create systems and structures in NATO which move fast, which build relationships with startups and scale-ups, which offer to them things that they find interesting, like rapid contracting, like access to all of our markets, and bring the creators in direct contact with the user. It actually doesn't happen that much with the big defense primes, etc. We want to break through all of the problems, do it really fast, and get straight to rapid acquisition of dual-use technology to the benefit of startups and scale-ups and to NATO.
And principally, I think I can be open that I'm strongly in favor of Sweden joining NATO. I think NATO is the greatest thing possibly happening to us lately. That, yes, we in the innovation community are happy to contribute to our collective security. There's a moral component to it. Yes, we like to make money. Yes, we like to build great, fun little things. But there is a massive moral dimension to it, which I think is there, and it's also a factor for us.
Let me just mention that to you. Let me just interrupt for a second. I really see that. And we see and we feel a real shift actually since the beginning of this year, the industry. And that's from the smallest to the biggest companies. A lot of companies are waking up and saying, wait a second, we can't live in a world like this and just stand aside. Leave it to the governments to do everything to secure us. So we really feel them now reaching out and saying, okay, what do we need to do? What can we do with you? And in many cases, companies are helping Ukraine for free. Very much. And Ukraine is standing, and we can talk more about Ukraine if you want, but Ukraine is standing on its feet, at least in part because of what tech firms have done for them quickly, without being asked, and for free.
Absolutely. I mean, Starlink is a high-profile example, but there are numerous others.
Absolutely. And Microsoft and ESET and Vodafone, and I could run you a long list. And what we're finding now is they're coming to us and saying, listen, we can't do this forever for free. We don't know what everybody else is doing. So we need a new system in place if we're going to be able to work together effectively. So this is also part of our reaching out to the innovation community.
No, and just to elaborate on that example again, it was just last year, some of the biggest pension funds in Sweden were doing ethical investments. It meant that they wouldn't do alcohol, tobacco, gambling, or weapons.
Yeah, we didn't like that.
No, no sense, right?
No.
If we didn't have those arms industries, there may be other soldiers marching in the streets of Stockholm today.
Yeah, absolutely. A very good friend of mine, she's the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine. And I think she hadn't really worked in the hard security world before, and she wasn't expecting to when she went to Ukraine. And then she got in contact with me from Sjöblad, which is the town through which all these weapons are being funneled to the Ukrainians
in
to fight.
southern Poland, yes.
In southern Poland. And she said, I'm surrounded by all this death. And I said to her, for the Ukrainians, that's life. It's what's keeping them alive. And I think it really shifted the way she looked at it. And I think we all need to recognize that. If it's in the hands of the aggressor, they shouldn't have it. If it's in the hands of the people who are securing and defending us, it's what keeps us alive.
100%. Yes, that message has to be out there. But allow me to dig one level deeper, please, into the innovation dimension. We may have innovators and entrepreneurs listen to this podcast. That's, of course, our hope. And what are you guys looking for? Would you like to point out some special industries or cases that you would find interesting if someone would get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So we have identified a number of innovative technologies where we are interested in developing NATO strategies and stronger relationships with small, medium-sized enterprises, as well as the big defense primes. To specify here, we already have relationships with the defense primes.
I would imagine so.
Our aim is not to we want to develop that more. That's great. But what I'm about and what my division is about actually reaching out to partners we haven't had before. So not to go to the Defense Association, but to go to companies that are not in the Defense Association, dual-use technologies, which we could potentially apply to our requirements. We have agreed strategies already on artificial intelligence, on autonomy. Next one will be on.
When you say autonomy, it's typically vehicles or
autonomous platforms, And of course, that's very much linked to AI, right? What makes them autonomous is their ability to employ artificial intelligence. And that includes not just strategies for how to develop and acquire them, but also principles of responsible use, important for us. And we can talk about that more if you want. But now we're going to move on to quantum, to biotech and human enhancement, and work on novel materials, propulsion, energy and propulsion. We have a list. Those are actually available on the NATO website for who wants to go and look. And one by one, we're going to work through those. In each of these areas, we're going to issue challenges to the innovation community and say, okay, this is the problem set we have. Not going to say, this is the technology that we need.
Exactly. We're looking just to solve the problem.
We have a problem. You have dual use tech. which might be adaptable or applicable. And then we will have challenge managers who are experts in the startup community. All these people are being hired. And we're going to say, once the NATO member states, hopefully soon Sweden and Finland, agree on this list.
Amen.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. It's getting close. So by 2025, we'll have 10 challenges every year.
Brilliant.
And the challenge managers will go out, find, say, 20 startups, bring them into the NATO structure. We call it Diana.
Yeah.
We will pay them for 12 months to work with us. We have a network of 60 plus, it's going to grow, but 60 plus test centers.
Any located here in the Nordics?
In the Nordics, yes, but in NATO countries.
Yeah, Denmark or Norway.
As soon as Sweden and Finland join, we know perfectly well that these two countries have very powerful ecosystems for innovation, including test centers, accelerator sites, startups. Cannot wait to integrate them into this structure. I would add that anyone who's interested in looking at the laydown of this can just go on the website.
Yes.
They're all there.
So you mentioned Diana. This is the program. Can you develop that a little bit, please?
Absolutely.
Tell us about Diana.
So there's two programs I'd like to mention.
Of course, the huntress of Roman mythology.
Indeed. That was a great acronym, which I had nothing to do with, but it stands for Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. And so the idea is a little bit like what I just said. We have now a network of test centers and accelerator sites across Europe and North America, with two headquarters. The idea is we will consult with startups, with the military, with academia, and with the political side. And every 2 years, we're going to go to the NATO member governments and say, we think these are the 10 challenges that we need to face. Agree. If they agree, the challenge managers go out, they find the right startups, we pay them to go through Diana. So what does that mean? It means they get access to the premier distribution of test centers and accelerators. Come in contact with the end user. They also get access to a trusted capital database. So we want them to have trusted capital that isn't from an adversary that's sucking all their data to go somewhere else or acquiring the company.
That should not be underestimated because it's truly a factor. We see foreign governments buying a lot of sophisticated companies over here or investing in them, getting access to data, which may or may not be intentional, but that is a strategic dilemma.
Absolutely. So we want to provide like education to the startups because sometimes they don't even think about that. And we want to provide them alternative funding, which we're going to do. And I'll come back to our innovation fund as well.
Please.
But another sort of advantage for the countries coming through, for the companies coming through this is we will offer them access to all 30 NATO markets, which is a big selling point. And NATO can act as a contracting agent for them for all 30 markets. So it makes it much easier. We know what we're doing. We've already prearranged some of the elements for them. So there's a lot in it for them. And when they come through the other side, that brings me to the Innovation Fund. We've also established a €1 billion fund that's largely to invest in deep tech. So with a 15-year horizon.
Yeah.
But it'll also be brought to the startups that are coming through or that have come through Diana. And we'll bring the investment manager. Hey, have a look here. We vetted it. We think these companies really have technology that can acquired by defense and security departments in our governments, meaning they're going to sell. And hopefully they can get investment from the fund as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And just to come back, you keep coming back to the topic of technologies. Ultimately, that's what you are looking for when you say, okay, so we have all these tech areas and its materials and nanotech and quantum, etc. And earlier in our conversation, you also said that the military had all these technologies. And then this guy, Steve Jobs, came along and he actually turned it into something. And I just want to share a reflection here, which is my experience really from being a startup builder and innovation coach in many contexts, is that inventing the technology is one part. And oftentimes it's the easy part because it's relatively straightforward. Okay, we solve engineering-wise or science-wise. Okay, we solve this. But then when it comes to making it usable for people, making it applicable, there are awesome technologies that have been sitting in a drawer simply because we have not been able to crack a relevant user case for them for many years. And that is a different skill set. It's a much more of a human understanding type skill set or a design dimension. And we're seeing right now, fascinatingly, a backlash across a field of technologies that used to be hyped. Blockchain is getting a tumble. VR, AR, XR, metaverse. Billions have been invested. we're not seeing the take-up that we expected some years back, right? When we were hyping this. Same for voice interfaces and personal virtual assistants, Alexa, Siri, etc. They've also been hyped and pumped and have underperformed. The user uptake is not there. So I see a strong trend here in some way that, yes, we have been inventing these awesome technologies. People have been going on stages, showing slide decks and saying, everybody's going to speak to technology. By 2024, you will not be typing on that old keyboard from last century. What's your take on this stop and then accelerate type innovation cycles?
So
How do you interpret this?
It's so interesting. And I think you're absolutely right. To a certain extent, that the examples that you used were a little bit like the tech industry version of what we have done with big platforms, which is to say, this is the technology, this is the platform I need. But actually, it may not be the platform you need. Instead of saying, these are technologies we can use, how are you going to apply it? And so I totally agree with you. And we're spending a lot of time now in NATO designing what we call digital transformation. But digital transformation doesn't just mean computers and smartphones and cables. It means mindset. It means training. It means an openness to full application of equipment, which in the security world is not always that. I want to give you an example,
please,
of how it really has worked, and which is inspiring us, which is the way the Ukrainians have integrated technology into what they do. So I'll give you a few examples. They used Google traffic to watch Russian forces building up on the Belarusian border because there were traffic jams.
Yeah, and they had their smartphones.
And they had their smartphones, so they could use it. They hired ICEYE, which is a synthetic aperture radar private company, to give them 24/7 radar images of what the Russians were doing, like this. They asked Microsoft, which for free, backed up all of their servers into the cloud so they're disaggregated and therefore can't be attacked. One of my favorites is they have basically adapted something like Tinder for artillery strikes.
Yes, it's an interesting case.
It's an interesting
case. When they
case.
share them, distributed artillery locally sourced to a specific target.
Exactly. Yeah. So while it takes the Russians 25 to 30 minutes to go from request for an artillery strike to delivery, it takes them 4 because basically somebody nearby swipes when you swiped and they can deliver it instantly. So these guys, they're tech savvy. They have a culture of innovation and they have applied that culture not to eliminate the traditional way of applying military operations, but to supplement it, to complement it, to make it faster, to make it more flexible. What gives me confidence is the reason the Ukrainians are like that and why that is allowing them to basically even out against an overwhelming Russian advantage in every other area
and manpower,
in numbers and everything, is they were taught by us. This is the result of a decade and a half of training by Western governments, Western forces, of how you work like we do. And it's given them a huge advantage. So I'm actually confident that we have the culture of innovation in the West. We can apply that in security. We have the technologies, but what we have to avoid is saying, that's the solution. No, we have to say, this is what's available. You apply it at your level,
in your
corporal
context.
Yeah,
exactly.
Where you are right now, we trust you. Do it.
That's the user case. And exactly, that's the distributed decision-making. That is perhaps the greatest advantage of the market system compared to the centralized system. And my favorite take on, if we zoom out for a moment, as you started here with the Cold War, why did the West win? I don't think it was economy-wise that the West just were richer and Soviet Union went bankrupt. No, it was all about out-innovating because the Soviet system was completely unable to innovate. They used the same engines, the same phone exchange systems for 50 years. When we came to the Soviet Union in the 90s and all the liberated countries, they still used the systems from the 40s in all these places. So that centralized system was simply impossible because you didn't have the competition element. You didn't encourage free thinking. You didn't encourage innovation. That's why they lost. And now we're witnessing this same thing again.
I think it's clearly what explains, in the macro sense of what you're saying, why the normally totally outmatched Ukrainians are actually winning on the battlefield. It's this difference in innovation, which is not just about technology, but in the way in which command and control works, in which they trust their soldiers to do things. The Russians are terrified of making a mistake, meaning they'll follow an order that's a bad order, and they'll keep following it until they get a different one, even though they know it's a bad order, but they're afraid of innovating out of mistakes.
And there's never been a culture of doing so.
No.
It's impossible to avoid Ukraine at this time. So unfortunately, there are still terrible things going on. But you're optimistic about the potential developments there over the coming 6 months or year?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say optimistic. And I don't know that anybody is particularly optimistic. What we can see every single day is the Russians committing war crimes on a massive scale by bombing the electrical grid and hospitals and water treatment facilities. And there are, I think I read today, 6 million Ukrainians without power and water. And my colleague and friend who I mentioned to you, the Canadian ambassador. So this is an ambassador. She was just visiting me, and we went to a camping shop to buy her a portable shower that you hang from a tree. They're shoveling snow to drink. And this is in an embassy. So imagine what it's like for everybody else. I personally have trouble seeing the way out of this. I think it's going to take a long time, or to put another way, we're preparing for the long haul. It's going to be horrible for them. There will be refugees all over Europe, but we absolutely have to stay the course, because a Russian victory would be so profoundly dangerous and destabilizing for Europe.
I agree.
That we simply cannot walk away.
No, and even an armistice would be a defeat in that way, because it would be an encouragement of aggression. There is, unfortunately, no other option than to keep fighting back. Yeah,
indeed. And they're doing it incredibly bravely, and we have to make sure that we actually provide the weapons that they need. But now they also need generators, and they need water treatment facility, and they need money. So all of our governments are working really hard on that. I just came from a NATO ministerial meeting in Bucharest where all the governments are focused on this.
James, this is a fascinating conversation, but I see we're unfortunately already running out of time. I think we could have been going. There are many other things I wanted to ask you, but if there's something you wanted to bring up in our conversation that we didn't have time to cover, now I want to give you that opportunity. If there's something you want to plug, or some shout outs you want to do before we round off.
Let me just say first, the reason I'm here, but I'm not the only one coming up both to Sweden and to Finland, and I already hinted at this, is we're really looking forward to your joining. And of course, Sweden and Finland joining will provide more security for the two countries here. It'll change security in the Baltic Sea, and it'll make NATO stronger. So it's a win-win. But when it comes to what I have to do, which is innovation, cybersecurity, but also climate and energy, all sort of files my division works on, there is such enormous potential here for us to work together and do things together. Also, because Sweden and Finland are in the EU, once they join NATO, it'll bring the two organizations closer together. And that's really important, because we're in an era of strategic competition. There are autocracies which don't wish us well.
No, they think they are at war with us. It's just that in Sweden, that insight has not yet percolated to most people.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to cyber and technology, that's where strategic competition plays out, for example, with China. And we need to circle the wagons, and the democracies, in my view, like-minded, law-abiding countries need to strengthen our cooperation. Bringing us all closer together, meaning Sweden and Finland in our club, NATO and the EU closer together, it's going to help us be stronger and safer. So we're really looking forward to that. And that's why I'm here, and why I'm here in this building, because Sime is really an epicenter of innovation in the Nordic area, and I want to help engage with that.
You're damn right on that point. Thank you very much, James. It was a pleasure to have you here at Sime and in the podcast. Good luck with things. I hope we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.